Hi, everyone. It's really a privilege to be with you tonight and to share with you a little bit about my research regarding understanding and measuring quality of life for adolescents living with advanced cancer. So let's take a moment and go back in time and back to being an adolescent. What were your hopes, your goals? What mattered to you? These are the questions that fuel my postdoctoral research, but with adolescents living with advanced cancer. So this is cancer that is difficult to treat and difficult to cure. What's important to this group of adolescents when living with advancing disease? Adolescents with cancer are globally considered a distinct cancer patient population. They have lower rates of survival compared to both children and adults diagnosed with cancer. And many adolescents experience significant psychosocial challenges following a diagnosis of cancer due to this very complex intersection between their physical and psychosocial development with a diagnosis of a life-threatening disease. And this intersection creates many complex and numerous needs for this patient group that adolescents report often remain unmet by healthcare providers. And so for all of these reasons, this patient population is considered to be one with significant vulnerabilities. If their cancer becomes advanced, when they're living with cancer that's difficult to cure, these vulnerabilities become exacerbated. Sadly, up to 40% of adolescents diagnosed with cancer will not survive their cancer diagnosis and will live with advanced cancer. This means that a significant number of adolescents will access palliative care. Palliative care is specialized healthcare designed to enhance their quality of life. Despite the vulnerabilities of this patient population, though, there are significant gaps in their palliative care. And as a clinician myself in pediatric palliative care, I've been actively confronted by these gaps. Specifically, enhancing quality of life is a dominant goal of palliative care, yet what quality of life looks like, what it means for this population of adolescents has been underexplored. And without knowing what quality of life means for this group of young people, it's very difficult to know how to enhance it as a clinician. So my research is really centered around quality of life. There are many definitions of quality of life, but one that's commonly invoked is from the World Health Organization and states, quality of life is an individual's perception of their position in life in the context of the culture and value systems in which they live, and in relation to their goals, expectations, standards, and concerns. So my postdoctoral research is really focused on developing a definition of quality of life, an understanding of quality of life for this population of adolescents, and then developing a way to measure their quality of life. And so specifically, I'm creating a conceptual framework, so really just a comprehensive conceptual definition of quality of life, of what offers meaning and what's important to adolescents living with advanced disease, and then taking this conceptual framework to inform the development of a patient-reported outcome measure, a PROM for short, which is just a certain kind of questionnaire that we give to patients in practice that would validly and meaningfully assess their quality of life. So at the start of my research, I went to the literature and was curious how quality of life had been defined and conceptualized for this group of patients. And I had a couple of really important realizations. So the first was that quality of life hadn't been defined or conceptualized specifically for this group of adolescents. So this really confirmed that we really didn't know what was meaningful and important to this group of adolescents as they live with advancing cancer. The second realization I had was that any developing of a conceptual framework or definition of quality of life for this specific patient group really needed to be informed by their voices and perspectives and not by the voices and perspectives of their healthcare providers and their parents, which is often how quality of life is reported in the research and in clinical practice. And again, if we think back to being an adolescent, I'm sure we can appreciate that our parents probably don't have the fullest sense of our experience. Due to the absence of the representation of adolescents' voices in quality of life research, I also created a patient advisory group, which is a group of adolescents and young adults treated for cancer who will accompany me throughout this research and to ensure that the voices of adolescents remain at the forefront of this research. So then to really formally begin to think about how adolescents living with advanced cancer might understand and describe their quality of life, we conducted a really innovative study using social media, primarily TikTok videos, as research data. So to be eligible for inclusion in this study, social media content had to be created by adolescents ages 13 to 19 years old. The authors of these posts had to communicate in some way that they were living with advanced cancer, their terminal cancer, or had multiple relapses for cancer. And finally, that the social media post had to reflect something important or meaningful in their life. It could be positive or negative, but something important about their life while living with advanced cancer. And we were really surprised by the raw and open experiences that adolescents described living with advanced cancer that they posted to their social media accounts. And we were able to collect 335 social media posts for the analysis of this study. So this research led to our proposed concepts of quality of life that we believe are relevant and meaningful to adolescents living with advanced cancer. So you can see them here: health, the lived body, emotional well-being, purpose and direction, and reorientation. And these concepts of quality of life are different from those concepts of quality of life that are often applied to adolescents with cancer, but that haven't been created by their voices and perspectives. So for example, the PEDS-QL is a very common measurement model of quality of life used in healthcare with adolescents. And you can see the concepts here: physical functioning, emotional functioning, social functioning, and school functioning. Another very common or conceptual framework that's thought to commonly underlie most quality of life instruments used with this population or used with adolescents with cancer has the following concepts of quality of life: physical, psychological, social, and general health. Although the differences between our proposed concepts of quality of life, and the concepts in the conceptual frameworks that I've just shown you seem slight, in clinical practice, they're large. These concepts highlight to clinicians, signal to them what they should pay attention to in the clinical care of this population of young people. Developing concepts of quality of life directly from their voices helps us to make sure that we pay attention to what's actually important to adolescents living with advanced cancer. For example, in the PEDS-QL, you can see the concept of physical functioning and how well the body functions. And whereas our concept of the lived body is a reflection of that, but it is different. It really reflects the subjective experience of living in a sick body that we heard a lot from adolescents posting on their social media. Next steps of this research are to validate these concepts of quality of life and develop a conceptual framework. We will then use this conceptual framework to develop items for our newly developed PROM. We'll validate these items, and then we'll conduct initial testing of this PROM. Each step of this research will be done with adolescents living with advanced cancer, and we're involving adolescents in pediatric oncology and pediatric palliative care programs throughout Canada. There really is a pressing need to develop a meaningful conceptual definition of quality of life and a meaningful and relevant way to measure it. As I mentioned at the start of my talk, there are significant gaps in the palliative care of this very vulnerable group of young people. They are a very, very clinically complex patient population to care for as a clinician. And we stumble and bumble with them often because we don't understand what they need and how best to meet their needs. It's really our hope with this research that we'll equip clinicians in pediatric oncology and pediatric palliative care to really begin to think about what quality of life means to adolescents living with advanced cancer, and then work with adolescents to enhance their quality of life while they're living with cancer that's unlikely to be cured. Thank you very much for your attention.